Well, our property is 240 hectares. It's just south of Te Puke in the Bay of Plenty. It's an area that grows very good trees, has a good climate, mild winters and a reliable rainfall. We bought the property 47 years ago, and it was a lands and survey development block, and their policy was to cut every tree down and make every blade of grass work, which led to quite a severe erosion problem when we took the block over, and that's where we started planting trees. And we had the option back in those days of planting either poplars or pine trees. So we planted both poplars and pine trees, and the pine trees got us started. And from there we just sort of continued on. We suddenly realised we liked trees. We had a lot of blocks or pieces of land that were not producing much, dirty little corners, gullies, gutters and that type of thing, which we planted up. And we've been very fortunate. We've had a good contact with several nurseries, but probably back in those days it was FRI, now Scion. And we'd go over and get some trees, and one of the nurserymen there, the head nurseryman, would say, hey, you take a few of these and pop them in. And that really got us started on the other species.
Mind you, we were young at the time, 21 when you first got the block, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And the fact, I think that you're young, we also didn't have a heck of a lot of money.
No.
So we had to do things small.
Yeah.
And the nurseryman could recognise the fact we were keen and wanted to give it a go.
Yes, we were on a pretty strict budget, and I'm sure if we went to our field officer and said, you know, we want some money to plant trees, they would have turned us down. But gradually we sort of, each year we got a few more planted, but it was the riparian strips that really got us started and the erosion problems that there was. There were several big washouts resulting from the heavy rain, and every time it rained, the stream, which was in those days all grazed out completely, none of these trees were here. Every time it rained, the creek would come up 4 or 5 metres and just take out fences, floodgates, bridges, whatever. And so gradually we've planted the stream up. It's all planted in our block now, and there's another big forest company above us, they've planted up, and then a big reserve behind that planted up again. So consequently the stream doesn't flood very often, although having said that, we had a cyclone in February this year and we had quite a bit of damage.
Because the creek doesn't flood now, we can put tracks alongside. It becomes a very attractive area to walk, and a lot of people thoroughly enjoy it because the water is absolutely pristine, and the children also use it for swimming in summer and winter sometimes. We've got bush robins back again. Mind you, it's pretty intensive trapping that we're doing for rats and ferrets and cats. And we found bush robins out in the back bush. They came after a while, and they've migrated down here, so that's really neat.
And there has been a big increase in bird life, whether it be pheasants, quail, tuis, the pigeons, they've all come back. And it's just the fact that we've now a corridor of bush right through, up the stream, through the native bush out the back that's brought them in. Environment BOP, or now Bay of Plenty Regional Council, have been very good over the years in helping with assistance with the fencing, some of the replanting of native trees. But a lot of the areas, even though there were a few big trees here, we've gone through and we've planted remus, kahikateas, puriri, nikau's and those sort of things. Although now we notice that the birds are bringing the seeds back in again anyway. So after we'd planted our initial plantings were for erosion, and then the stream bed came in, riparian planting. And after a wee while we suddenly realised we quite like trees, and we sort of started looking around for different things, and somewhere along the line we got a couple of hundred redwood trees from Rotorua, from FRI in those days, and popped these in. This was just a corner of a paddock that had been planted into barley, and it was just an ugly little corner. So we popped these in, and these are now coming up to 40 years old.
I think I was pregnant with our third child when we planted these.
Yeah.
And you actually never realise how it's all going to end up when you start planting. There's all sorts of benefits come from doing this sort of thing with very little effort and very little cost. we've got such wonderful benefits from these redwoods. People staying here and camping and picnicking, and children love them. They've got little mountain bike trails down through the middle, and it gives you a sense of security, these lovely big redwoods.
My father, who was a builder, he thought the kids needed a hut on the farm, so he built this hut. Now when he built it, the redwoods were smaller than the hut and it looked pretty ridiculous, but of course now it's just tremendous, and there's so many children now have stayed in the redwood hut. We've had magnificent barbecues and that, it's just been great. So yeah, you start looking at alternative species, and then from there we started looking, our soils are all kaharoa ash, what is known as kaharoa ash, or it's a volcanic ash, very light pumice soil which when exposed just washes away. And our land is made up of nice flat valleys and short steep sidelings with good flat tops. So to put cattle on these big sidelings, they were just knocking them around. So then we decided, well, you know, some of these sidelings and that we could perhaps put into trees. So we started planting up blocks of trees. A lot of the people that came into the blocks with us at the same time were much older than us. They were returned servicemen, and they gave us quite a hard time when we started planting trees. However, during the 90s when we started harvesting these trees, people said, oh by gosh, you're lucky to have your trees, aren't you? That's when stock prices were quite low and things weren't so brilliant in farming. So we have been lucky, but then over the years we've just planted blocks that we could handle as a family. So we sometimes 1 hectare, sometimes 5 hectares of a maximum, and it's just been so good to us. So since probably the late 80s right through till now, we've been in a position to harvest trees right through, and that's been good. And the beauty of trees is, of course, that when the price drops off a bit, you can leave them there. You don't have to pay storage or freight or anything, and they just sit there and continue growing. So we did have quite a gap, sort of between 2000 and perhaps 2008, 2009, where we didn't harvest any trees. So the last block of trees we harvested were 32 years old, and they were very good. We struck the high prices and it was very good. The best we've harvested was a block just across from here. We netted 58,000 a hectare for that. That was the very best. They were 8 metre pruned, and they were good. But we've been somewhere between sort of 45,000 a hectare, and we'd averaged I think $42,000 a hectare for the plantings up till recently. And while we've been talking about high prices over the last 3 or 4 years, we've only been averaging around about 32,000 a hectare for that. But that's still very good money, and compare that with dry stock farming on some of the steeper hills, there's just no comparison. But you do have to wait that initial 25 years.
And we were getting those prices because they were well pruned and well thinned, and when you get that price, it makes it worthwhile planting 1 or 2 hectares.
Yeah.
A logger will come in and do that because they're good high quality trees and timber. Also the 3 children were all into pruning for pocket money, and that taught good work ethics, that they'd come up and they'd prune all these trees. So a lot of it was just small blocks each year, and it worked so well for us.
We have been fortunate here in the bay in the fact that we have got several good outlets. We're surrounded by several good mills between Taupo, Patauru, Rotorua, and also we have got the port at the mount. But I must emphasise that if you're only going to plant small blocks, the access has to be good and the quality of the trees has to be good. So a hectare of trees right out the back of the farm with no roading to it is probably not such a good idea. But the first hectare we harvested, it was actually only half a hectare. It was right beside the road out in the front paddock, and we netted $21,000 for that half a hectare.
Question.
Yeah, the impact on stock numbers, what we were doing was we were keeping our flats, anything that was flat or we could get a tractor over or a manure truck, we were keeping out, and we were only planting up the steep sidelings. Yeah, so we didn't actually have to reduce our stock numbers by very much because some of the sidelings we're taking out weren't producing very much anyway, and the damage to them from cattle was pretty bad. However, we did get very involved with the deer industry at the start. I'd been very involved with hunting And so we were right at the start of the deer industry when prices were very good. And at that stage of the game, we were making plenty of money out of the deer. So we were prepared to take out complete paddocks. Whereas up till then we would take out a siding or a corner or something like that. So once the deer prices came in, we could take out quite a big paddock and plant it in trees. And that was very good. And deer were very good to us. But however, because of our light soils, deer just were damaging our country too much, and we eventually saw 2 or 3 boom and busts and we got out of the deer. And by the time we dropped out of the deer, we were in a position we could start harvesting trees. So, but just to keep pouring fertiliser onto some of our sidelings just seemed to be crazy to me when it was all just being washed down into the valley bottoms anyway. But we started off with sheep and beef. We went into the deer in quite a major way. And then over the last probably 10 years, we've phased the sheep out completely. And we were doing dairy grazing, which was very good to us. And then just over the last 4 or 5 years, we've leased the farm out to a dairy farmer next door. So following on from planting up the erosion areas and then some of the steeper hillsides, we took out some quite bigger areas out through here. This is the back of the farm, and we just looked at our hillsides and thought they're not producing much, let's plant them in trees. So the block we were looking at in front of us here, there are 3 blocks covering about 12 hectares. They were split into 3 age groups, 25, 26 and 27. We started harvesting last year, about not this summer, the summer before. And those blocks netted us $30,000 in our pocket at the end. Per hectare. We would have normally gone and spread that over 3 years just because of tax purposes and everything, but the prices were so good, we just jumped in and did it. So it was still spread over 2 years because our balance date was June, and we wanted to get it done. But it was good, just good. Something like $300 and something thousand came in off those 2 blocks, and there's no way we could have ever done that with livestock off those blocks at all. Immediately we'd finished harvesting. We finished harvesting in August last year, and we went straight in and started planting straight away. So as the boys were still harvesting down here, the planters were coming in behind them. We've had a phenomenal year for growth, and these trees are just 12 months old now, and they're well away. But we again emphasise the fact that the flats, we either keep them out for stock, hay, silage, or in the case here, maize, just whatever. But we just feel the flats are just too valuable for trees at this stage. And also the trees just don't seem to do quite so well. Pine trees don't do quite so well on the flat. They certainly grow well, but they become very gross and heavy branched. So we stick to our sidelings. So we have stuck in these blocks with pine trees. But then you come around to here, behind there are some blackwoods. They're doing very well. And then the block behind me again is cypress. Now our main species are pines, but following on from the pines, we do like the cypress. We think there's a good future in those. Cypress being either macrocarpa, lusitanica, or in this case C.ovensii. Macrocarpa is just about out because of the canker. It's sort of gone out of favour. Lusitanicas are good. And this Ovensii here is a relatively new species of the cypress, and we just like them. Our oldest ones we've got are down in the valley. They're 14, 15, coming up to 18 years old, and they look good. We have seen some of the wood sawn, and it looks to have a lot of promise. Following on from that, I guess the next species we really like is either some of the eucalypts. Probably our most favourite one would be the redwoods though. But yeah, the eucalypts are sort of a hit and miss. And we still have stuck with the eucalypts, and the one that we really like, looks like doing well, is Eucalyptus globardea or Eucalyptus pilularis. Now they are sort of semi-frost tender, but do well in our particular area here.
Forestry.
The other interesting thing in these paddocks here was the odd casual Matsudana willow we planted, and they were put in initially for shade for the stock, and they've worked well, But what we didn't appreciate was that in the spring, just as they start to get their leaves, they just become a mecca for possums, and the possums were just coming down, and you could come out, and I think one of the best trees we've got 28 possums out of one tree. You have a fox terrier underneath so they don't come down, and you just shoot them off. But since over those, that was in the earlier years, since then we've really reduced the possum numbers down with trapping and a bit of poisoning and that, and now if we come out we get half a dozen possums in a night. It's probably been a good night. So they've been very good for that. The other thing with all the alternative species and the different small blocks is we've had tremendous support, and we've been very involved with Farm Forestry Association throughout New Zealand. And that's just been so good, and there's just such tremendous amount of knowledge amongst those farm foresters scattered throughout every branch in the country, and particularly with alternative species. So get away from your pine trees and you start looking at your blackwoods and your eucalypts, redwoods and those cypress, and every district's got their experts. We do like global deer. We put some in by accident a few years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, and they've done very well. We have seen some very big trees being harvested, and it's a good one. Initially when we started planting, we basically did all the planting ourselves, so hence the smaller blocks, and then we started and we did all our own pruning. So you can see that as the years gone by, the first 2 or 3 blocks we harvested were all 8 metre pruned, but then as you get a bit older, you don't like the height so much, you start coming down. But what's interesting is once we got into the position of starting to harvest and the bigger paddocks, then we started bringing in planters, commercial planters and commercial pruners. I still enjoy pruning. Pruning's a good job, but I'm reluctant from the big high ladders now. I sort of stick to the lower pruning, and I mean those bigger blocks like that, you want professional guys, and you can work away there for days and days on your own, but then you see the pruners come in and they just go through like locusts.
People often say pruning cypress is so much hard work because of the number of branches.
I think with cypress it's a little bit different, we found with cypress that a little and often is much better. Keep the branches small and keep them tight for those initial years. But there are a lot more branches and it's a bit more expensive. And really, we haven't really proved ourselves with the cypress yet. We know we can grow pines, the research, the data's there, we know we can grow them, we know we can sell them. With the alternative species, you've got to get someone in to come in and cut them, and a specialised mill to do it properly. It is a different setup, but I still think there's a tremendous future in the alternative species, yes. So the hill opposite us here, that's the type of country it is. You can see we've got a flat valley, you've got big flat tops on the top, and you short steep sidelings. No problem for logging. All the logging so far has been done with ground-based machines, and that hill behind us there, or that where we're looking at, is destined for trees this following winter.
It's actually hard to imagine when you're planting that you're actually going to see it being logged, but it's surprising how fast those years go from planting to harvesting. So don't let the time span put you off planting a small block of trees. You'd be surprised how quickly those years go by.
An aspect of the farm that we never ever realised or appreciated was the fact that once we started planting trees, people started coming and they were interested in what we were doing. Initially it was because Dad built a hut and our children used the hut and brought their friends along, but then later on other people heard about it and then started coming, and we developed a walkway system up the stream and right through to the back to the native bush. Since then we have built 4 huts, and they are used right through the summertime and a lot in the winter time now, mainly booked out. And then a few years ago, our daughter, who lives next door to us there, said that we needed something a little bit more upmarket, and so she decided that we'd convert the wool shed over. We've got rid of the sheep about 10 years ago, and she just got stuck in, and we cut all the timber off the farm, so all the wool's aligned with leyland, and they've come up really well, and the wool shed's just used for families now. It'll sleep 12 people, it's got showers, toilets, everything, and very popular. But it's just the fact that we've planted the trees on the farm, and we haven't planted a solid block of trees. So no one wants to go next door where the big company forests are just solid pine trees. But it's the fact that they can walk into trees, they can walk into a paddock, they can walk back into trees, up the stream, and there's just a variety. And there seems to be a desperate need for this type of thing from town people. We're just amazed at the urban rural gap that there is now. Just more recently, over the last 12 months, we've been picked up by one of the local kindergartens who wanted to bring their children out here for a day on the farm. That now has developed into once a week to come out onto the farm, and another kindergarten has picked it up too. And these kids come out onto the farm and it just love it. They have a fire, they have a barbecue, they're allowed to do whatever they like on the farm within reason, and it's good. There has to be a certain percentage of parents to children, and that was a concern for a start off. But as it's turned out, there are more parents want to come than needed, so the parents are actually rationed or monitored as to when they can come out. So it's just good. And we enjoy the people, and it just makes us keep things up to scratch as well. So it's good, yeah.
So what age trees of Leyland cypress?
The trees were 25 years old, and they were basically a shelter belt. And when we were logging out the back, we had to take out a couple for the trucks to get through, and they were pretty shady, and there was a mess underneath them all the time. So we decided to take them all out. So the trucks took 2 or 3 loads away over to the mill at Tauranga, and this was the result we got back: 2 or 3 truckloads of timber. So trees have been very good to us financially, aesthetically, and also socially.